So first of all, good morning to everybody who is listening to my lecture today. And as you can see, we will talk about more or less non-technical problem. That means the interdependency between digitalization and sustainability. And I would like to start with a question. Have you ever thought about the term of sustainability? So what does it mean? Sustain and ability. And perhaps you should think that over if you use this word because it's really, let's say, the two words, the two terms, sustain and ability, are linked together. And I would like to talk about the challenges of digitalization and, of course, the risks and the opportunities in connection to sustainability. Next, please. Yeah, okay. What is my agenda? First of all, I would like to raise your awareness for this topic because most of you are engineers, and perhaps sustainability is part of your education, but I think we should go a bit deeper in this problems. So I will first of all give some short explanation about digitalization. You all know it. We will talk about sustainability and corporate social responsibility. And then I would like to talk about the connections between sustainability and digitalization. We will talk about the European Green Deal, you probably have heard about, and Horizon Europe, which is part of our SmartSoc project. And then in the end, I would like to talk about the challenges, opportunities, risks, and deficits of sustainability and digitalization. Next, please. As I am a grandfather, I think this is for me a very important slide. We are really working on our Earth. And if we go to the next slide, you will see that yesterday, Peter, please. Yeah, so we have yesterday in Germany, we had the so-called Earth Overshoot Day 2021. As you can see, last year on the 22nd of August, we celebrated, whatever that means, this Earth Overshoot Day. And what does it say? It marks the date when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. And you can see in 1971, it was almost Christmas. And as I learned yesterday from the newspaper, in Germany, this Earth Overshoot Day was yesterday. Very actual, it was yesterday. And when will it be in 2021 globally? I don't know, because there are no figures available today. But I can tell you one or two figures. First of all, if we all would live like the Americans, we need 5 globes, 5 Earth. If we live like the Germans, we need almost 3 Earth. But if we live like the Indians, about 1 Earth. So, you know, we are, next please, we are living on credit. And this is why I copied this picture, because I think it's necessary to have it in mind what we are going to live in our life. Next, please. The next slide, I don't want to explain in a long run. You all know what digitization and digitalization means, and we are all talking about digital transformation. That means taking advantage of digitalization to create completely new business concepts. This is what we heard in the last presentation, and I think not only in the following presentations, but finally in the presentations of the students within their case studies, we will learn about this digital transformation in the one or the other way. Next one, please. So in the next slides, there is no Peter. So just to show you some examples of digitalization in life. So go on, please. And the next one as well. Okay, and so let's go to the power consumption of digitalization. Digitalization, of course, is a power guzzler. Only in Germany in 2019, 33 million tons of CO2 for internet and internet-enabled devices have been spent. And as I read just 2 days ago, about 3%, and this is also a consequence of Corona and the pandemic, about 3% of the whole power consumption comes from internet and internet-enabled devices. And so you can see that, of course, digitalization concerning the climate is a very severe problem which has to be solved in future. Next one, please. Okay, combined with this power consumption, we have to focus a bit on this so-called rebound effect. That means rebound effect describes the increasing demand of an economy which is caused or enabled by an increasing productivity. Originally, intended savings can be partially cancelled by the so-called rebound effect, and I gave you 2 examples. I bought an e-bike 2 weeks ago, and of course I'm traveling much more with my e-bike, perhaps as I did it before, because I'm living in a region where we have a lot of hills. So second example, home office, distance learning, video conferences. That's what we are just doing every day today, lead to more power consumption. But on the other way, it attracts less green gas emissions because of less traveling and traveling activities in all. Next one, please. So let us come to sustainability. What does sustainability really means? It has well defined in this way of triple P. That means people, profit, planet. And you see profit has something to do with companies, with economy. But sustainability is normally defined in these 3 ways. First of all, the ecological side of the coin, the economical part, and of course the social part. And we have to talk about the social part a bit later. Next one, please. If we go to the explanation of sustainable development, it is really basic to come back to a sentence of Mrs. Brundtland in 1987, when she said, meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And you see my first picture with this half globe, you can see what our common future problem is. We are living on our not on our demands. We are using more than our globe really gives us, and this will lead really to severe consequences for the next generations. And this is why the sustainable development, of course, has been in the focus of the United Nations as well. Please go on, Peter. And you can see, and I'm sure that most of you know about the so-called Sustainable Development Goals, which from 2010 to 2015 we had the so-called Millennium Development Goals, and today we are talking about the Sustainable Development Goals with the aim of 2030 to get, let's say, to come to an improvement for these 17 goals. Go on, please. I listed some of these sustainable development goals just to give you an idea what is behind. And I don't want to read everything, but just to focus on the key words. First of all, we have poverty, of course, to reduce the poverty in the world. And please be so kind, if we are talking about this, come back to your own business, come back to your own ideas, and you will find that a lot of projects are connected with these 17 guidelines, and of course with digitalization in future. To end hunger. This is first of course a very important point, because as you know, we have about 800 million people in the world who have not enough food. Either they have direct hunger or so-called hidden hunger. That means that the quality of their food is bad. Of course, ensure healthy lives. We heard about this. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education. You know that we just in the pandemic, we have a lot of problems educating young people, students included. Next one, achieve gender equality, which of course is one more, and ensure availability and sustainable management of water and the sanctions. So next one, we have the access to affordable, reliable and production. Please go back again, Peter. Okay, sustainable and modern energy. We are all talking about this. Promote sustained, inclusive, sustainable economic growth. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization. That's what we are all talking about, and I will come back to the European approach a bit later. And of course, smart cities, make cities and human settlements safe and sustainable. Next one, please. And and of course, the production of patterns, conserve and sustainability, use the ocean seas. You know that just if we go to the plastic in the ocean, this is a very important point. And peace, and of course, the implementation and revitalization of the global partnership for sustainable development. So this is really at a glance what is behind the Sustainable Development Goals, because just in our SmartSoc project, we are all talking about the one or the other of these Sustainable Development Goals. Please go on. So we talked about sustainability, and the next point of my presentation is to link sustainability with the CSR. CSR means, as you can read, corporate social responsibility. This is a European approach which has been founded in the early 80s in a Green Book of the European Commission. And you can see, or you find that CSR, I use CSR in the future, that CSR is a building with its 3 pillars of ecology, of economy, and of the social point. That means people, profit, and of course the planet. And this is surrounded by the corporate governance. Corporate governance you will find, of course, first of all in companies, but corporate governance has also something to do with governments, that means with policy. Please go on. So what is CSR about? Of course, I showed you 3 main pillars. We have the environment and everything what has to do with water and with climate change. We have labor rights, which is a very important point. If you know that child labor in many branches play a very sad role. Forced labor, go to the world champion of soccer in Arabia, rights to organize, and safety and health in companies. Human rights. Human rights are more and more a very important issue in the CSR debate. And of course, the poverty alleviation, that means to raise job creation and to use public revenues for the development of the countries. Next one, please. From the scientific way, we now go back. Yes, thank you very much. From the scientific way, we have the so-called Carroll pyramid, which, as you can see, which starts more or less with a more ethic way of CSR, the legal responsibility, that means follow or obey the law, and of course the economic responsibility of the companies. Next one, please. And this brings us to digitalization and the digital ethics. What is it about? So I promised you in the beginning that we will talk about the connection, let's say, of digitalization and of sustainability. And if we are talking about the more moral approach, of course, we have to talk about digital ethics. And I think just in the case studies of the 9 groups, the question of how do we solve the societal, as we said, the societal approach of the case studies. We had the technical, we had the economic, and the societal part of the case studies. You will find that, of course, we have, as I asked in the last presentation already, what is about the data security? And there are 2 words of people who are working on the digital ethics part. Digital ethics is not a marginal topic of companies. You all know perhaps that the corporate social responsibility. Now we have the corporate digital responsibility, and firms that establish rules and standards for a responsible approach to digitalization gain the acceptance of customers and the trust of society. This ensures their long-term business success. If we look to the pandemic, You know that, of course, the development of digital possibilities to follow infected people is one part of digitalization where just the data security plays a quite important role. I know that in Germany it is much more critical than it is in other countries. But anyway, this plays a really important role. In the future, this is from Mr. Buffen, in the future, the topic of digital ethics will become even more important as the degree of digitalization increases. Companies will only be able to successfully manage the transformation if they win the trust of the people through formulated ethical guidelines that ensure the responsible handling of people's personal data and privacy. You see that this is something for engineers which should be considered as well. If we go to the next one, you will see that I focused on exactly this point, digitalization. And as a lawyer, I'm perhaps able to say this in a more or less a funny way. Digitalization has not only to satisfy the dreams of engineers, but to take into account of at least the following 4 points: the needs of the society in general. I think the last presentation we heard is an excellent example for this. The needs of the individual, last presentation, the limitlessness of natural resources, which in many ways play a very important role. And as I mentioned in the beginning already, and I will come back to this later, the problematic nature of green gas. Go on, please. So if we look to this in a, let's say, as a sort of summary, so you see that digitalization has different points to be considered. We have, first of all, of course, the green IT, which we are talking about, the business or the sustainable IT services. I just mentioned we have the dedicated innovation system from in the environmental way. From the economy way, of course, we have the mobile business we are talking about, and we have the labor market, which, of course, in the future will play a very important role. Because if you change a society from a more industrial system to a service-oriented and system, this is a very difficult way to go. That's what we. Just one example. You know that from the coal production, we have in Poland 80% of the energy comes from coal. And now we have, and I come back to this a bit later when we are talking about the European Green Deal. Now you must transform the society and the labor market from this part of energy to other industrial and to other industries. And we have the societal way, which, as you perhaps saw already, plays a very important role in my presentation. If we go to the next slide, you will see what are the, here we are. So what does the sustainable development, sustainability and CSR mean? We have, of course, going from left to right, we have the national resources And I showed you this from the point of the Overshoot day. We have energy. We are talking every day about energy and climate. We have the point of regulation. I could give you some examples of Germany, but I don't have the time. We have the climate change, which of course goes together with energy and natural resources. We have the society. That means the demand of the society is changing as well. Of course, because the young generations are demanding other objects than we do in our generation, and the customer. The customer, of course, plays a very important role. If you think about fair products, for example, of green products, then you see that customers are asking for other products than we did perhaps in the last decade. The employees, of course, want to work in companies which are having a good human resource system. And perhaps you heard about the word employer branding. Employer branding means that, of course, a company nowadays has its own brand, and young people coming from universities are asking not only for money, but also for good working conditions and the human rights. That means human rights play just in a global industry a very important role. Let's go to the next, please. So if we come to the corporate digital responsibility, we were talking about digital ethics, and now the corporate digital responsibility of companies who are working in the digital sector. They, of course, or for those companies, the CDR from CSR, corporate social responsibility, now it goes one step further. And I think it is nice, or it is important to read what is developed on CDR. These are a unified definition of CDR because established. There is no real definition, but generally speaking, the concept refers to the principles of CSR, as I just mentioned, within the context of digital transformation. It is not restricted to compliance with statutory requirements and existing standards. The broader field of voluntary commitment is also covered. And you see in this formulation, which comes from a manager, that of course CDR nowadays is on its way, but it has not really finished concerning the definition and of course the transformation. So CDR is mainly coined by data security, by artificial intelligence, transparency and fairness and future of work. And I think it is really important to have this in mind in companies. And the last point, responsible handling with digitalization characterizes the reputation of a company and improves the quality of the products and its relations to all stakeholders. Building up trust starts with a comprehensive strategy in handling technology in a responsible way. In this context, the human being must be the center of action. And I think if we are talking about this corporate digital responsibility, you see that nowadays we were talking about the branding of a company. I have been part of Deutsche Telekom before I retired. And I can tell you, if I look to the publications of this company, just as an example, and in your countries, Deutsche Telekom plays more or less important role as well. This company is really on its way to convince people inside the company and, of course, the customers to go this way to digital responsibility. Otherwise, they would lose customers, of course. On the other way, coming back to the startup companies, today it is extremely important for all startups really to make its focus on this point. That means, again, to convince the customer and the employees of the company that they really answer to these aspects of digital responsibility. Let us go to Europe and the so-called Peter. Thank you. So, what does the European Green Deal mean? So, the European Green Deal has been established. What does it mean, established? It has been discussed in 2019 and has been presented by the European Commission in December 2019. Of course, as you can, if we are talking about Green Deal, that means transforming the European economy for a sustainable future. And you see that not only in the companies, but of course in governments in general. For me, Europe as well has its own European government. They are very focused on the green development of our European Union. And as you can see, I know it's a bit hard to read, but we will come to this at the next slide. Just a second. So, of course, the European Climate Pact. This is, of course, something which is essential for the future of the European Union, and of course, really to reach the goals which have been formulated in Paris some years ago. And if we look, for example, to a new decision of our highest court in Germany last week, you can see that really the discussion of the development of the Climate Pact, the European Climate Pact, is a key issue, not only for the European Union, but European Union has 27 member states. That means all member states are obliged to follow the rules of the European Union. They all agreed to those goals. And this is, let's say, the internal part. But as you can see on the left, the EU as a global leader. Well, okay, what does it mean? They are part of the global development. But I think after the conference, the press conference of the new President Biden last week or 2 weeks ago, you can see that even China comes to the is ready to follow the global goals of the climate development. I think this European deal for your generation is a very important point to follow. If we go back, please, go further, Peter. because the European deal is more or less, is more or less the, how to say, the political basis of what we are talking about. And you know that more than 700 billion euro will be spent by or with this European Green Deal. But then we come to the European green topics. So you know that, and that we started our projects, our Erasmus projects many years ago with this so-called Horizon 2020. I remember that last year when we started our SmartSoc project, we were all talking about Horizon 2020. Okay, 2020 was yesterday. Today we have, this is over, and Horizon 2020 is replaced by Horizon Europe, which started in February this year and which is on its way to be formulated in details. And you see that in both, in the format Horizon 2020 and in the new Horizon Europe, we have topics. And I think it is, we should use the time to look at that. We have, of course, increasing the climate ambitions. We have the clean, affordable and secure energy. We have energy and resource efficient buildings, which is more and more problematic, because in Europe we have a lot of old and very old buildings. And as I followed just in the last few days, I found that on the scientific way, all actors, they claim that most of the climate problems we have come from not resource efficient buildings. Sustainable and smart mobility. I remember that in SmartSoc we had some case studies already concerning the smart mobility. Farm on fork. That means, first of all, the agricultural sector plays a very important role and is problematic in the climate discussion towards zero pollution, toxic-free environment. Of course, this is a general goal. Strengthening our knowledge in support of the European deal. I think we are in the Erasmus point, and I understand my presentation a bit concerning to educate people who are doing something else to be well sensibilized concerning this European Green Deal. Next one, empowering citizens for the transition towards climate neutral, sustainable Europe. And I really think this is something to be considered. And that's what we do with our Erasmus program. Next one, please. So if we go to the horizon, a bit further to this horizon, this are the new topics which has been formulated. The EU's KEYS funding program for research and innovation. And this is, again, the basic of our SmartSoc project is tackles climate change. You will see this repeats a bit what we said before. But now we have helps to achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We were talking about this some time ago, but you see that even in the programs of Europe, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, plays a very important and boosts the EU competitiveness and growth. If we talk about competition and growth again, we have to consider that Europe is part of the globe. And in the part of globalization, For Europe, it is important to play an important role in the concert between the US, between China, and other competitors and players in the world concerning the economy. Facilitates collaboration and strengthens the impact of research and innovation in development, supporting and implementing European Union policies while tackling global challenges. That's what I just mentioned. Supports the creation and better diffusion of excellent knowledge and technologies. This is something which is within the Green Deal a very important point. Not to lose the contact to other countries around the world, and which is an important point as well, creating jobs, fully engagement to the EU's talent pools. That means universities first, boosts economic growth, promotes industrial competitiveness, and optimizes investment impact within a strengthened European research area. You see, this is more or less a summary of the policy of the European Union, and it comes, we can say, this is part of this European Green Deal. This is what Europe wants us as citizens to do. Let us go to the next, please. And if we focus on the digitalization, industry and space, you see that in the cluster 4 of this Horizon Europe, you find the areas of intervention, and you see manufacturing technologies, key digital technologies, including quantum technologies, emerging enabling technologies, advanced materials, a very important point because of the natural resources, artificial intelligence and robotics. A lot of you are working in this field. Next generation internet, advanced computing and big data, circular industry, a very important point, circular industry. If you look to the sustainability of course, circular industry plays a very important role in a lot of sectors, not only in clothes, but of course in electronic devices, low carbon and clean industry, and space, including Earth observation. This is why it's called industry and space. And you see, it is only an example of what Horizon Europe covers. But I think it is important for you to have this in consideration. So if we go to Germany, next one, Peter, please. If we go to Germany, you will see there are, like all countries in Europe, of course, have their own, let's say, action plan. Well, I think I could fill a lot of slides with these action plans with the details, but I think it is fair enough really to mention these 3 points, because they answer a bit what we were talking about before. So digitalization must support human beings in their individual development. And I think it is good that this is in the beginning. Digital technology must serve the society. That means not only the dreams of engineers, like I said before. And of course, digitalization must serve the preservation of our national resources, and many not oppose them. I think this is a risk because we do not really attention, most of us, concerning the natural resources. So let us come to the next one, please. because now I want to come to the opportunities of the sustainable-oriented digitalization. As I told you in the beginning, I want to talk about the challenges, and as you can see, the opportunities, but also the risks. And I'm very interested in a discussion after I finished my presentation, because I hope that I made some provocation as well in the one and the other way. And this is why I asked Peter to have a bit more time, because I really expect a good discussion after I finished. So, opportunities. What are the opportunities of sustainable-oriented digitalization? I think what we heard in the last presentation, sorry to come back again, it's a very good example. And if I see the titles of the 9 case studies which have been worked on in the last 2 months, I see that there are a lot of, or let's say all of these case studies are answering the question, what are the opportunities of sustainable-oriented digitalization? It can interconnect renewable energy sources and support the energy transition. You saw the 3 pictures I showed in the beginning. In the agricultural way, of course, it is in the security way. I think there is a lot of possibilities in order to interconnect these energy sources. It can link bicycles, buses, cars and trains, both inside and outside the cities. That means smart mobility. And I remember that in the last mobility last year, we had 1 or 2 case studies which focused on the smart mobility, and I think we are in the beginning. Because digitalization, this is a technical part. But if I look to my more or less hometown, which is 10 kilometers away in Darmstadt, which is about 40 kilometers south of Frankfurt, I see that not only, let's say, that the technical problems are more or less solved concerning, for example, bicycles. But now it is necessary, of course, to enable the people in the town to use that. For a lot of them, the price plays a very important role. So they have a car bicycle system, a car sharing system, and so on. And I think, or look to the to all our problems which are linked to Amazon and the distribution of our goods in the cities. So these are, from my point of view, extremely important to develop technical solutions, but not only to develop technical solutions, but also how can we really work on this, that the society, I showed it in the German policies, how to bring it to the customer and of course to the citizen. This is a European, not only a European point. If you go to developing countries, you have these problems as well. The technical solution is there, but how can you bring it to the citizen? It can help to fertilize our crop precisely and thereby also protect biodiversity. This was a case study we had in the last run. It can provide transparency in supply chains and for consumers. And of course, just the supply chain plays a very important role in in many aspects, not only not only the transportation, for example, as well, if we go to shipping or to aircrafts, but as you saw in the Suez Channel some weeks ago, we have really to think over how can we solve those problems in a proper and sustainable way. It can bring about the true circular economy. Again, the circular economy, which in the future will play an extreme important role in all countries. That means not only in Europe, but if we go, for example, to developing countries, I just mentioned it, you will see that circular economy plays an extreme important role. And finally, it will help us better evaluate the sustainability of financial investment. If you go to this part, you will see that more and more investors, big investors, they invest today in really sustainable solutions, not only in the industrial sector, but also in the service sector. That means if a company develops sustainable oriented digital products, of course, the advantages on the financial in the financial part on the financial market is much bigger. Let's please go to the next slide, Peter. So we talked about the challenges, or we talked about the opportunities, but of course there are main risks referring to the environmental dimension of the sustainability. The first, the implementations of the increased energy consumption of ICT, data centers, and the internet, which leads to a significant carbon footprint of these technologies. You remember in the beginning, we were talking about the consumption, the energy consumption, and I told you that nowadays about 3% of the carbon footprint comes from ICT. And they expect up to 2030, 13% of the energy consumption will come from ICT. But we were talking about, of course, the rebound effect. And you see that this is really linked together. So I think it would be, let's say, it would be a mistake only to use these figures, 3 and 13%, but also to consider the rebound effect in order to have a clean discussion about this fact. The repercussion of the steady increasing amount of e-waste, which is characterized by particular hazardous as some components of ICT are usually and corrosive materials. You know that the waste policy is a very severe one. Most of you perhaps have seen the film and the video about Ghana, where most of our e-waste is exported. Nowadays, you also have heard that e-waste is not is not accepted by former importing e-waste countries. For example, Malaysia is one of these countries. That means the problem of e-waste brings us back to the circular economy. That means the better circular economy works, the less e-waste you have. Well, in the end, you will have it, of course, but if we go to the electric cars, you will see that the problem of the waste of the batteries is not solved yet. We started with the atomic energy, where the waste problematic of is not solved up to today. So the rising demand of raw materials of those technologies, their extraction is associated with high risks for the workers. Look, for example, the conditions in the Democratic Republic of Congo. If we see the coltan, which we all need for these devices, and it sometimes takes place in the context of forced labor and generates a high level of pollution. I think, but I see that there are ways how to replace these natural materials by other materials which has been developed in industry. Let us go further. So what are the sustainable deficits? We have, of course, and you see, we are going to a sort of summary already. Digitalization has sustainability deficits. What are they? And it's a sort of summary. Ecologically, power consumption through ICT, internet, and data centers. One of the biggest, I learned it some days ago, one of the biggest data centers in the world is in Frankfurt. I didn't know this, perhaps you didn't know this as well, but it's interesting, and they are just building a new one actually. So smartphones, consumption and use. Of course, this has nothing to do now with the technical part, but all of us and all of you and everybody knows that the use of smartphones has its own, its own life. I wonder, and perhaps this is a question of my age and my generation, we are slaves more or less of our smartphones, which of course has more a social dimension and a social dimension. The e-waste I was mentioning already. So from the economy, the recycling deficits are obvious today. This in the smartphone sector, manufacturers, suppliers, and the working conditions. If we look to China, Foxconn, for example, you know that the working conditions are a real problem. Apple is producing with Foxconn, and I wonder who cares for the working conditions if he buys an Apple laptop. So planned obsolescence, shorted service life. So what you all know that if you buy a washing machine or something like that, even a smartphone, the life cycle is goes shorter and shorter. And I think this is a deficit of the economical use of digitalization and the digital of the world of work. I was mentioning this already. The labor market has to be is in a big change from industry to service, to the service world, but there we have to differentiate. On the one hand, of course, you have the companies and the employees in the companies, and in the companies it is the shift from towards digital responsibility plays an important role. First of all, of course, for elder people. So it is in the responsibility of companies to give also elder people, and for me, elder people, the age starts with 40, 45, the possibility really to follow and to be on the track towards digital solutions in the company. The second point is, of course, what does the education do in schools and in universities? It is, of course, necessary, and please believe me, this has nothing only to do with the education of engineers, but also in my job. I mentioned I'm a lawyer. If you go to business, to management people, you will see that, of course, the shift and the transformation to digital activities must be improved. Otherwise, they are lost. And we learn it now in the pandemic situation. If I look to my country, but I know, and you read it in your newspapers as well, that Germany is really at the last place concerning digitalization transformation. But if we see that we have the world of work and the people going to work, that means are on the labor market, they are not able to follow the development. This is extremely poor. So politics, and you see, I added one more, ecological society and politics, because it is, and we talked about the European Green Deal already. Of course, this Green Deal has to be transformed and realized in the countries, in the European member countries. The preservation of democracy and education. So I think this is important, and I just want to ask the question, what happened with Mr. Trump when they closed Facebook, for example? Is it the role of the politic really to control all these social markets, or can an operator do this? I just asked the question. So societal problem situation through extraction of raw material. I talked about this. Psychological obsolescence and rebound effects. We have, of course, has not been really solved, these problems, and the consumption opportunities, e-commerce and freight transport problems, which has not finally solved yet. The next one, please, Peter. Okay, a digression in the end. How do we live following most figures? That's what we do in our pandemic way. But on our topic, we start our heater or air conditioned. We measure our data using our data when biking, jogging, swimming, watering, strawberry fields, and so on. Everything we are doing, we measure. We measure it, but what are we doing if we have the feeling this is too much or too less? The amount of data 2018 was, well, to be honest, I don't know what the zettabytes are. Perhaps someone can explain it to me. 33 zettabytes in 2018, but you see in 2020 we have about 175 zettabytes of data around the world. What are the consequences? We are producing data which are evaluated by companies and by governments. Yeah, what consequences? But for what purpose? What are we doing? Sorry. But what is the purpose of collecting figures? Who benefits from our knowledge about the figures? And what does that do to us individually, us as citizens of customers, the economy, that means the companies, to the climate and to the environment? These are questions I'm asking. I'm not able to give you really the answers, but I understand my presentation as a sensibilization to digitalization and to sustainability. And what's about our consequences? Total individual transparencies, pros and cons. That is what we have to discuss. What's about our individual lack of transparency? What are we really, what we know about those problems? And to come to the last slide, please, Peter. Just to summarize it in some questions, we are in a crucial phase of digitalization. Crucial does not mean negative or positive, but we are in a phase of digitalization which is remarkable. Reliable numbers of consequences of digitalization are not available yet. Digitalization has many positive effects. I talked about this for companies, employees, and for us as civil society. But due to the rebound effect, we are not able to estimate the influence of digitalization on sustainable development really. And anyway, we may not lose sight of the consequences of digitalization because we have only, next please, one world. And next please. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm waiting for your questions and hope to give you the one and the other answer. Thank you.